Hello and welcome to Sibling Slant, where we discuss games from our different perspectives. I'm Peter, an avid gamer and general geek.
And I'm Deb, a storyteller and casual gamer. Today, we're talking about the fourth installment of the Her Interactive Nancy Drew mystery games, Treasure in the Royal Tower. This time, Nancy Drew is jetting off to exotic Wisconsin, where she is staying at a ski resort in a castle originally owned by a millionaire who then also bought a tower from France that used to belong to Marie Antoinette, incorporating it into the castle where it still sits today, sealed off for some reason. When a winter storm strands Nancy and the two other guests in the resort, she decides to solve the mystery of who vandalized the library, but soon discovers that the real mystery were the friends we almost made along the way. The plot with Dexter, where we get his sad and weird backstory, is the best part of the game. It's the only part, in fact, that has any kind of emotional hook where it kind of leaves you going, okay, tell me more. What I would like to hear more about this. What was going on with that? That was very weird. But in saying that, that's also the best part of that, and it really doesn't matter for anything when it comes to the actual mystery, so I guess...
Yeah, it is completely disconnected from the core mystery, which doesn't do it any service. Basically, the way I see it, it's wonderfully written. It's a wonderful side story. It's just such a shame that's in this game because it could have been so much better if it were in a different game.
I'll take it one further. I think that the plot with Dexter should have been the main plot of the story. Write out all the Marie Antoinette stuff. I think that they only put that in because they're like, we have to make it sort of educational.
Yeah, Her Interactive really has this bad delusion in a lot of their games that they're educational when it's like... in the strictest sense.
They have educational elements, but I say that when you're creating a fictional world and you're telling fake history facts alongside actual history facts, that
with
actually...
no clear delineation.
None. That makes it so much worse. And it's just... For a child, how are they going to distinguish between... like, is Malone a real person from history?
Yeah, and particularly with the subject matter, I am vaguely aware of Marie Antoinette being a somewhat controversial character in what was actually said, what actually happened, all of that, and I do not trust Her Interactive to do proper research.
No, this is outside the scope of what they're really best at, which is drama, and that's why the Dexter part was so good.
Definitely.
Yeah. I'll also say, this is, again, a bit of an aside, but I need to get this out of the way. I have gone on record as saying that the castle looks like Walmart, and people don't understand me, so this is just to clear up the air here. It doesn't actually look like Walmart. It evokes the same feelings of being in a Walmart in that... I'm sure the roof is fine. It has the same oppressive largeness and similar looking areas with nothing to look at. It's very dull, yet overwhelming. So it's both overstimulating and understimulating to trudge through the various halls. So this isn't the case for all of the environments, but for a lot of them, it feels like I'm walking through Walmart and it's not a fun time.
Yeah, and it's also just overly large. The weirdest thing is how many dead ends there are. Just completely empty, pointless hallways with dead ends. just the main environment, which is this castle, which, you know, you think castle and you're thinking, oh, that's a cool setting. It's just dull and lifeless, and the few cool locations it has, it's like the game actively doesn't want you to be there, because you have the underground section that's very underutilized. There's not a whole lot to do there. You have the outside section that the game explicitly does not want you to spend long out there, because there's a freezing mech thing there.
It's a storm.
Yeah, and yeah, you can't even go outside for the first in-game day. The library, though, you do spend a fair amount of time in there, and it is a nice-looking location. As I recall, it has a secret passage of sorts, like a secret...
You have to access it through a secret means, which in and of itself makes it very fun to interact with. So there are different ways that you get in, and once you get in, there is a secret room, which is always a plus. The library is definitely the creme de la creme of the entire thing. I spoke French there because Jacques. He didn't even make it on my list.
He made it on my list.
Okay, go for it.
So, to be clear, there's only one likable character in this entire game.
Who?
Honestly, I'm including Nancy. But no, the old guy, the caretaker.
The caretaker is obnoxious, but he kind of... You like him.
He grows on you.
Yes.
He grows on you.
Yes.
He's the... Even if you don't like him, he's at least the best written of all of the characters. But since you brought up Jacques, I particularly have a problem with him because he is uncomfortably sexist. Especially considering that this is a game for young girls.
Just to give that a little bit more context. I'd say that it's not necessarily that his character is sexist, but that them writing it in makes it seem as though the game developers themselves might be sexist.
Some of the remarks he makes definitely is icky at best and completely misogynistic at worst.
When I showed up, you were having a catnap on the floor. Ugh, I would be ruined by you American women.
I'll grant you that I don't remember. I mostly remember that he's just
aggressively
hideously
flirting at you.
Do not ask me about the affairs of my heart, Nancy, or I would think you are trying to steal it. How will you spend your time here, Nancy?
Despite being engaged, which is a massive point of his character.
It's a massive point of his character insofar as he tells us once and then doesn't really care about it, but that's theoretically why he does what he does, but what he does is nothing, so it doesn't really matter. Which is most of the characters. The cast is aggressively useless and unlikable, which is unusual, I'd say, actually, for a Nancy Drew game. You're always going to have the unlikable characters, but usually you have a couple people who you're like, oh, I hope they aren't the villain.
Whereas in this case, we know who the villain is from almost the get-go. It is very obvious, like absurdly obvious, and there is no recognition from Nancy.
Yeah, what he's talking about is that Nancy, for some reason, hyperfixates on who vandalized the library instead of... That's the way they talk in the game for people who are But if you're unfamiliar, why are you watching this? But she should be focusing on reporting that Lisa Ostrom is committing passport fraud, which we find out right at the beginning. Like, it's so much bigger than anything else.
Within the first, half hour, to be generous, hour of gameplay,
Yeah.
you find a not insignificant number of fake passports and fake IDs, like all different names and everything, and you can confront her about this. But she goes, "Oh yeah, I'm a reporter." Why was I going into like a stereotypical Minnesotan accent there? "Oh yeah, I'm a reporter, and you know, you have to do that sometimes." And Nancy just takes that as if it's not like a federal crime.
I will go on her behalf for this one and say they might have done that on purpose. It might not be bad writing, because Nancy herself commits so many crimes as she tries to solve, like, if there was a kitten stuck in a tree, she'd break into a bank just to find out who, like, scared the poor thing.
I mean... No. No, that's...
No, I agree. It doesn't excuse it. It's still a crime, but I understand what I think they were going for. It is bad writing. There's a lot of bad writing.
But she's the only suspicious character, and she only becomes more suspicious as the game goes on. But quickly, I do want to touch on the last character, who I cannot stand. Professor Hotchkiss is just absolutely insufferable with her inane chatter, which you can't skip, and she talks so much, and she is so annoying. I could continue to rant on forever, but I can basically make my point just by saying that she reminds me of a number of Faulty Towers problem guests, only in this game you don't get the catharsis of Faulty being snide and snarky at them.
Found another draft, have we?
We have to be very careful, Mr. Faulty. He's not very strong.
Indeed, yes. A rapid movement of air could damage him irreparably.
I mean, I don't know if I've ever noticed how annoying Professor Hotchkiss is.
Professor Hotchkiss is claiming she's been robbed, for one thing.
No.
But the real scandal is downstairs.
No.
His name is Jacques Brunet.
No!
What?
Are they implying that Professor Hotchkiss is here and we're going to have to talk to her?
It's a mess. It's a mess. She is... There's nothing really to say about them, though, because there's really nothing to any of the characters besides Dexter.
Yeah, no, they're all pretty... I'd say after Dexter would be Jacques, which strip out all the sexism and ickiness, and he does have a little bit of complexity to his character, although his rationale for doing what he's doing is questionable at best, but at least he isn't completely two-dimensional like the actual villain.
Yeah, the villain is just kind of a Scooby-Doo level villain, you know what I mean? Which is fine.
And written worse.
Don't worry. My spicy devil villain venom...
Oh, no.
The heck?
They're all written fairly inconsistently in terms of tone, and I think that's really where the game loses most of the points with me, is that tonally it doesn't make a lot of sense, because a lot of it feels very Scooby-Doo-ish mixed with like Looney Tunes, but then you have this dark subplot with Dexter.
And then you have the voice acting, particularly with the villain, where they got like literally like it's obviously an adult, but it's an adult doing like a Saturday morning cartoon child voice. And it's just so jarring because she is not supposed to be terribly young.
We don't really know what age she's pretending to be since she has so many different personalities, so she could be. But no, like, it all kind of ties together. The writing is very weak, the story is very weak, the setting is bland for a castle.
Yeah.
Right? It's bland for a castle. That's
strangely bland.
That's weird, but...
And, as mentioned before, the dead-end hallways that actually, by the way, make it very easy to get lost.
Yes.
And before getting to my final point, the puzzles are almost all horrible, especially the one to get into the elevator, which is that sort of trial and error, just press the buttons, and if they stay down, you've got the pattern right, which I already don't like those, but this one is randomized every single time, making it just so annoying.
I actually don't mind that kind of puzzle as much because it's a puzzle that you can figure out. Like, it's designed that you're supposed to figure it out with no prior knowledge and no prior skills other than a memory or a pen and paper. And I'm fine with those kinds of puzzles. It's things like slider puzzles and anything involving decoding something in a really esoteric kind of way. Those can be really annoying. I didn't write anything for the puzzles for this game because they were all so forgettable that I forgot them.
Yeah, I didn't look back at the footage, but in my notes I wrote down that, like, almost all the puzzles, like, made no sense and were just there to waste time.
I think the best example, because this, and the only one that stands out to me, because this is just so dumb, was where you have to rearrange the position of the shackles that are on the wall to match the position of the squares that are on the opposite side of the hall, and I don't know what they were thinking.
All of the puzzles in the tower are so stupid because of how the tower was transported, like, presumably unbuilt and then rebuilt in the States. And so did they unbuild all of these complicated mechanisms?
Yes.
And rebuild them?
Yes. That is the assumption here.
So dumb.
It might be dumb, but, you know, those construction workers were like, we need to make sure that this priceless whatever... It was a diamond, wasn't it?
Now, why don't you toss me that big honkin' diamond so I can blow this popsicle stand and never set foot in Lamo, Wisconsin again?
Oh my gosh, she is 10. Gosh, it's so forgettable.
Gosh.
I just looked at it.
No, it was some sort of diamond because...
Like, whatever, riches, you know?
Yeah.
But they...
Stolen in a rightful sale.
It made no sense. It didn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah,
but,
no. Story made no sense.
At least nothing horrific was in the game. I give it points for that. I give it points that it's like, if you're gonna have a dumb story that's written poorly with bland, boring, weird characters, have the stakes low.
This is foreshadowing.
Have the stakes be really, really low, and someone messed up the library. Those are pretty low stakes, and so I will give them points for that. The mystery doesn't really matter.
The game does still have attempted murder, though, and I do... That brings me to the last point I wrote down, how at the end, Nancy's debrief letter at the end, she says that, what was her name? The bad
Lisa.
guy? Lisa,
I think,
was
yeah.
charged with attempted grand theft, which I feel is kind of the least of her misdeeds in this, because, as previously mentioned, she possesses multiple fake IDs and passports. She vandalized the library, which was something she actually did as opposed to attempted to do. And then assault, knocking out Nancy Drew, and attempted murder. Because remember, she lured you out of the castle and locked you out.
Right. Right.
In the middle of winter. So...
But at least to the kids playing the game, that's not going to clock.
I mean, yeah.
It doesn't, it's not
like there's gruesome murder or anything.
Right, this isn't the second Laura Bow or anything.
Yeah,
So, when looking at it in its totality, would I recommend it to anyone? No. Like, not really. If you're an avid Nancy Drew game fan, like, if you're a fan of the games themselves.
Yeah.
Play it. Play all of them. There aren't, there's a limited number. Why not?
Yeah.
But it's not a good game.
Definitely don't start with it.
No.
And, leave it to one of the last ones. This was, back when we were going through the entire series, I think this was literally the last game we played.
And just so happens to be the last one on my list for best to worst. For now.
It's the worst one so far. No, yeah, it's definitely at the bottom of my list as well, so far. Unlike Deb, I am not foreshadowing a definite worse one.
He just doesn't remember a lot of the other games. I've played them within the past few years.
Yeah. And that's all we have for today. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye. That's all we have for today. Thanks for being here, and we'll